For pretty much everything I plant, I just dig a hole and bung it in. However, blueberries are tricky little fellas, so I'm not going to do that with these. But I've got these are, what are they? Powder blue. I thought I'll give these a crack. It's winter here at the moment. If you have cold winters, then it's best to plant them either in spring or autumn you could do. But if you live in New Zealand or somewhere with a mild winter, you can plant them whenever you like, really. So I'm going to get on with it and make something nice for these to grow well in. I was speaking to this older lady recently, and she's ever so kind of like strong and healthy. And she said to me, "Oh, I eat blueberries like every day." And I said, "Yeah, really?" And she said, she goes, "Oh yeah, I just sort of bung them in the freezer, and then every morning when I want some, I just grab a handful out, and I can just chuck them on my breakfast." It kind of inspired me, and I thought, that's awesome. And so I said to her, "How many bushes do you have for you and your husband?" And she says, "Oh, 5. Planted them years ago, and they just keep churning out fruit." So straight away I thought, I'm going to go and buy some plants and see if I can do the same. So this was my first attempt. Not particularly great. I mean, it's not terrible, it's still alive, but it's this big, say, and when I bought it, it was probably this big. So it's been in the ground 8 months. It really hasn't grown very much. It looks perfectly healthy, but it's not exactly thriving, and it's never going to get to the size of being able to feed us at the rate it's going. So I kind of looked into it a bit, and the main issue I'm having is blueberries like acidic soil, and most soil isn't acidic. This is heavy clay soil. Clay soil is pretty much always alkaline, and so that's the problem that I've got to solve. This is the area I'm going to put the blueberries into. I'm going to dig it out a bit because it's pretty kind of steep. I think if it was flat, I wouldn't bother. Like normally I would just put cardboard down to suppress the grass, and then I would kind of like either cut holes into that and plant into it, or I would cover it with compost. But in this situation, just because it is quite steep, I'm going to kind of level it off a little bit. A lot of the lands around here is pretty steep, and I find that when I plant stuff on really steep land, there's a couple of issues. One is that if you're mulching around that plant, a lot of the mulch will just kind of obviously fall down the hill in the rains and stuff, so that's not ideal. And the other problem is water doesn't hang around for long. In the winter, that's not a problem. There's so much water, like that this is actually, we got a huge storm last night, and this is actually a little bit waterlogged, which is why I'm digging it now, just because it'll be soft. So in the winter, it's not an issue. In the summer, it gets pretty dry. And if you've got a steep slope and when it rains, it just falls away, the plants are not going to get much water. So I think I'm just going to try and level it out a little bit just to sort of slow down that kind of fall of water. That's the first thing. And to make my life really easy, I put this on. So I've just put a tarp over there and I put some wood on it. I don't know, I did that like 6 months ago. So the grass is kind of like, you can see it's about, I don't know, 90% of it's dead, and it will just make sort of stripping off the turf easy, because doing this when it's all sort of fully matted with grass is actually quite hard work. So I just want to cut down on that work. Right, that's done. That was really, really easy. I think the fact we had so much rain last night helped, and then having the tarp on that killed most of the grass made the digging pretty straightforward. So that stage is finished. Something I noticed digging through all that soil is that even though I'd put the tarp on, the soil was absolutely matted with grass root. And so when you think about putting in a small tree, or in this case a small bush, those roots have got to kind of fight against all of that matted root mess. I think that's part of the reason a lot of plants can struggle when they just don't have enough space for the roots of the plant to really spread out. I guess once a tree hits a certain size, those roots are big and it can probably get through anything, but definitely starting things out, I think clearing out some of that grass is going to be a huge advantage. I've only been digging for a couple of minutes and that's already pretty much level. This line here is a bit ugly though, it doesn't look very straight. I thought I might as well tidy it up. You could just whack a stick in and put a string line to it, but I inherited these from my grandfather. Pretty cool. Made in Sheffield, like lots of steel was back in the day. Nice little gadget. Anyway, put that in. Since that soil's pretty alkaline and I know that blueberries like acidic soil, I'm going to put in a bit more organic matter in there, and I want to kind of up the acid content a little bit. What people will tell you is, oh, use coffee grounds, that's great for adding acidity. It's like so many of these kind of things in gardening, these little pervasive myths, it's not true. So coffee itself, before it's been made into coffee, is slightly, well, it's not slightly, it is acidic. Once you make the coffee, those spent grounds have got very little acid left in them. They're almost neutral, so they're certainly not going to alter the pH of your soil. One thing that will help though is pine needles. Pine needles are pretty acidic. I'm just going to I've got loads of them. There's pine trees all over here, so I'm just going to gather a load of them up and put them in the wheelbarrow. Look at this, we're at the winter solstice here, and this is an apple tree. Leaves still haven't even turned colour yet. Maybe next month, taking its time. Ooh, ooh. You know, I made this path out of clay, slippery as anything. One day I will fall. It's worth watching just for that.
Pine needles are covered with this kind of waxy coating, which means that they take a really long time to break down. And therefore I'm going to use a bit of compost just around the base of the plants, and that will give them something to feed off for the first sort of few years whilst the pine needles break down. And I'm also adding in a little sort of handful of pine needles to that compost just to improve the acidity a little bit.
I reckon these should do all right now. They've got plenty of compost, they've got some organic matter, there's plenty of pine needles that help with acidity. I think I'll leave it there for this week. Thank you so much for watching. See you next week.